I think I have a reputation of being pretty balanced and not partisan. And I'll note that the border, the porousness of the border is a two-way issue, because there's a huge issue in Canada of the transportation of guns from the United States to Canada, which is the obverse of the fentanyl issue, and it's created by the same problem. You have this long border, and there's inadequate law enforcement, and a very high proportion of the gun crime that is committed in Canada is committed as a result of guns that are illegally transported from the United States to Canada.
What kind of guns are those? Are those ghost guns?
They're ghost guns, they're automatic weapons. By the way, Pennsylvania is a not insignificant exporter of illegal guns to Canada, which is not surprising given the large number of guns that are trafficked and sold and the large number of gun violence here in Pennsylvania.
I wanted to ask you actually about Pennsylvania and Canada and what the trade relationship is right now, which could give us some sense of what the impacts of tariffs would be here in this area.
And I think the impact, you asked that and I didn't get to it, but the impact is a really important question. And it's what causes me to be concerned about what I think is an overreaction of an across-the-board tariff. Because the trade relationship between Canada and the United States is enormous and consequential. I have my friends, if you asked at the station, what's the United States' #1 trade partner? I mean, 2/3, 75% of the people would say China or Mexico. They'd be wrong. #1 trade relationship in the United States is Canada. Almost $1 trillion in trade, two-way trade in goods and services cross our border every year. That is, I'll put that in a more concrete way, it is $2.5 billion a day in goods and services trade cross our border between the United States and Canada, and that generates and supports millions of jobs on both sides of the border.
And Pennsylvania specifically, what are the focuses in Pennsylvania?
So Pennsylvania's #1 export destination for goods and services manufactured or produced in Pennsylvania is Canada. Our #2 country for imports is Canada. About $15 billion in exports a year from Canada, from Pennsylvania to Canada, and about $13 billion in imports from Canada to Pennsylvania. So very important to Pennsylvania, very important to the United States as a whole. So you say, well, what is the impact? Well, if you take a tariff regime, and you have to factor in reciprocal tariffs, because you can't expect that Canada's just going to sit there, and they've already said they will respond to these tariffs by putting tariffs on U.S. goods being imported to Canada. So the #1 impact is an increase in price, which impacts competitiveness, creates inflationary pressures that our consumers will pay. The increase in price is almost inevitably going to create reductions in employment. And these are reductions in employment not only in Canada. The Canadians are talking about the fact that these tariffs are an existential threat to the Canadian economy, to the automobile sector, to the construction sector. But it is also an existential threat to U.S. manufacturing, which is so interconnected with U.S. manufacturing is so interconnected with the Canadian economy. So take U.S. automobile manufacturers. Here's a great statistic for you. A typical car that is manufactured in the United States and exported to Canada, and Canada is a big export market for U.S. automobiles, crosses the border 9 times during its manufacture. The car itself doesn't, but parts will cross the border. So it will drive up the cost of parts, it will drive up the cost of automobiles, it'll drive down U.S. competitiveness in the automobile sector, it will result in reductions in U.S. employment in the automobile sector, in U.S. employment in the construction sector. And those are and inflation in the United States. And it's why, by the way, that when the president announced his tariffs and when he's talked about his tariffs, U.S. businesses, U.S. governors, U.S. senators, U.S. business associations, the Chamber of Commerce, the Farm Bureau, about as Republican a business association as there is in the United States, all uniformly come out against the tariffs because of the adverse impact on their businesses and on their employment in the United States.